Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. And on this video, it's sort of like what I used to call the overview as part of my long videos. And of course, it's going to cover all sorts of things that are happening between about the 10th of March and the end of March, which includes, of course, the big total lunar eclipse, which is looming as I speak. Then I'm going to be doing a separate video so that we can see what's going on really from the perspective of all 12 signs. So you get something that's applying to you personally, as well as something a little bit more astrologically technical. So that pleases those of you who really do like to know all of that technical aspect of stuff. So before I begin, I just want to have a little word about the Amadan conference, which was about a week ago. I'm recording this on the 3rd of March, and it is about just over a week ago since it ended. And it was just such a beautiful event, and absolutely everybody there was part of it, contributed to the overall ambiance, and we got some really seriously good astrology done. But at the same time, we had a very good time, and all sorts of us got to know everybody, and firm friendships were formed. In fact, we've got a whole Amadan group being formed as I speak, and we're going to make it an annual event. So those of you who missed it this time, or those of you who really would like to attend, we're looking at just before Easter next year, sort of 2nd of April, if you want to start making room for Amadan. And I promise you, it's a very special place and very special things happen there. So let's get on with our events and how we look at things through astrology. And it is fascinating to be an astrologer at this time. We are learning so much, and you must learn as you're an astrologer. You're never too experienced or too old to learn new things and to really allow the astrology to speak for itself. And we can see just what a wonderful vocabulary astrology is, how it describes and reflects what is going on so amazingly accurately. Of course, our problem as astrologers is getting it right as we look ahead. We certainly see it as it's unfolding, but getting it right as we look ahead is a lot more challenging, as you know. So I want to start right in with what the most recent developments are. Now, this is not the first time I've said we are living in accelerated times. Everything changes day by day in terms of the global picture. Aside from just random events, nature-driven, if you like, which are happening in different parts of the world, we've also got the big global community that is now shifting on its axis. We're seeing things being formed into new packages, and it's a very uncomfortable process because we're not sure where it's all going to end. And last week, we had some shuttle diplomacy going on. We had President Macron of France going over to meet President Trump. Then we had Sir Keir Starmer, the United Kingdom Prime Minister. He went over on the Thursday. And then on the Friday, President Zelensky from Ukraine, he had his meeting with President Trump. And as you know, things seem to be looking really rather rosy by the time we got to Sir Keir's arrival in Washington. And the meeting obviously went very well, with lots of positivity and, the bonds between the United Kingdom and America really reaffirmed. There was a feeling of hope and we were going forward together. But that all fell apart literally the following day when Zelensky was at this meeting. Very unorthodox, very unusual. It was televised. And it's hard not to think that part of that was a bit of choreography, or be it a little bit loose. And because suddenly things spun out of control. And while it appeared that Zelensky was, trying to put forward his position and his country's position, it seemed to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance that, in fact, he wasn't appreciative of all the help America had given and was not really intent on peace, which I don't think is the case. I think things just got a little bit out of hand. And of course, in the aftermath of that, Europe came together, big meeting on the Sunday, showing huge support for President Zelensky. And what came out of that was what Sakir has called a coalition of the willing. In other words, all of those who can and do in Europe will do what they can and do in order to provide defense for Europe itself, which of course is a good thing. We should have done this a very long time ago. And Trump is completely right about the fact that, we've sat by and sort of not done as much as we could and should. So it's a wake-up call for Europe, and woken up we are, awoken we are. But of course, there is this huge unknown expanse in front of us as to whether this will have an ending which is good for everybody, or whether this is going to lead to a great deal more instability in the world. So certainly these days are very interesting. So to get to the astrology right off the bat, on the Friday, Friday the 28th of February, when Zelensky was in Washington having this very brutal meeting with Mr. Trump and J.D. Vance, there was a new moon in Pisces, and that wasn't necessarily the significant part of it. What was really significant was that this meeting was held at the moment when an alignment was taking place that we could actually see. If you looked at the night sky, we could see a whole lot of planets lined up behind the sun, so to speak. And there'd been a lot of hoo-ha about this, in that, it was a spectacularly rare event, hadn't happened since 1675 or something. And that got a bit out of hand because it's not a common event, but it's not that rare. And in my Friday bite that night, even though I knew nothing about, because it hadn't happened when I wrote it, what was going on in the White House, I talked about the previous occasion that a similar alignment had been in play. That was back in 1982. And I had a look at the charts of this alignment so that we could see it quite clearly, and talked a lot about, what it represented. So I'm actually going to begin with that so that you can see what I'm talking about. And here now is what the planetary alignment looked like on Friday. As you can see, because what I've done is I've shaded in a sort of pale greeny blue color the area in which this alignment takes place. The important thing that, and you can see if you're familiar with astrology, we can see the sun in the sort of 4 o'clock position here in this chart at 10 degrees of Pisces. And then if we look, we go anti-clockwise round, we come to the 11 o'clock position, almost 12 o'clock, and we can see Mars in Cancer. So the stretch of sky, so to speak, between the sun and Mars is what this alignment is all about. All the planets in that segment are behind the sun, are in the framework of the sun. And the only planet outside the group is Pluto, which we can see in the 5 o'clock position at 2 degrees of Aquarius and 53 minutes. So this is quite a special alignment. But to give you a reference point, we know what happened on Friday, and we know that this has changed history. What happened in the Oval Office on Friday changed the history, certainly, of Europe, and maybe even the outcome of the Russia-Ukraine war. We know that. So we know that that spectacular alignment that we're just looking at has played a part. But now let me take you back to 1982 when there was a similar alignment. Again, this time I've shaded it again, same color. And we are looking at the sun at 19 degrees of Pisces, and that is in the 4 o'clock position. And if we go clockwise around the chart, we come to Mars at 17 degrees of Libra. So this is, quite an interesting, it's quite interesting because it's again the sun and Mars in a way that we're looking at as being the stretch of sky. Mars is at the end of that. I know we can see the moon in this particular chart, but the moon, of course, is moving very fast all the way around. It is part of the alignment in a way, but in another way, it's not. We're looking at the planets as opposed to our satellite, the moon. But it is interesting that we've got these two comparatively similar groupings. Now, 1982, which of course was almost, 43 years ago, we had quite a significant year. It was the year of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and you can see that in the 8 o'clock position of this chart. Saturn at 21 of Libra, Pluto at 26 of Libra, and Mars at 17 of Libra. And it was this particular year that there were a lot of very interesting developments which sort of chime a lot with what's going on. I think Israel invaded, Lebanon again. And so there was a war with Lebanon. And you know how destabilized the Middle East has been. And we also looked at Argentina, who invaded the Falkland Islands, and Britain went to war with Argentina to reclaim the Falkland Islands, which it did. It was a very bloody war. And it's quite interesting that this alignment was occurring then, and we had certainly one really very important war. Warships, Thatcher was in power, and, it was a huge event for us, certainly in the United Kingdom. And I think the world also held its breath to see if it would escalate in any way. We look at the alignment that we have today, and here we are in this other very delicate period of global relations. Now, the other thing about this chart, as we look at it, that both Princess Catherine and Prince William were born in this year. And this was also an important kind of eclipse season for both of those people. And so we get the idea that there are certain figures of importance who also turn out to have been born or to have been instrumental in what's going on in the year. Well, we've only just started 2025, so we have no idea just yet whether this is also going to turn out to be a very, very important year for the Prince and Princess of Wales, but I expect it does. So I just wanted to show you this picture, and this alignment before it happened was the subject of a book called The Jupiter Effect, by John Gribbin and Stephen Plageman, I'm not sure how you say that. And they talked about the kind of solar winds creating a lot of disturbance and affecting the Earth's currents and the Earth itself. And so they predicted a huge earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. And these were two scientists. They weren't two astrologers. They were two scientists. And so the world was a little bit up in arms about this and expecting, the collapse of that fault any day, which actually didn't happen. And to set things historically correct, it is said that John Gribbin now deeply regrets having ever written the book. So whether you're a scientist, whether you're an astrologer, an astronomer, making your predictions based on what's going on up there in the celestial sphere is a little bit of a risky business. Sometimes we get it bang on, and sometimes we very definitely don't. So I wanted to put that in perspective before we even begin. And I do think, actually, that this alignment in itself. Well, the thing is that we've also got Neptune conjunct the North Node at the moment, and also the fixed star, which has completely escaped my mind now, but we have sheet. We have this kind of configuration which has been very destabilizing. As you know, we've had a lot of LA fires and other events, earthquakes in the Santorini Basin, or maybe it isn't called the Santorini Basin, but it's around the island of Santorini. So there's a lot of earth instability, and we are looking at something that's very interesting. And as we go forward and we come to this lunar eclipse, that's going to really, really put a lot of pressure on this particular alignment. And I wouldn't entirely rule out Earth movements, whether they are in and around that part of Italy in the Aegean Sea, or they're in some totally different part of the world. But the thing that we do know about, and we don't have to, look at possibilities, what we know are facts. We know that something has to be decided about the Russia-Ukraine war, and that now all bets are off because the United States has said, look, we don't want this war. We want you to make peace. And hey, guess what? We're not going to support this war anymore. So we're out. And that's a huge concern, because really and truly it's going to be very difficult for Zelensky and Ukraine to really prosecute their side of this war without American help. So we are in quite a situation globally, and it is reflected in these alignments that we can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up now the picture of the lunar eclipse, and let me get that here in front of us. It's from the perspective of Washington, because this is going to be very important as we look at it from Washington's perspective. What I want to say is that the new moon, when I set that from the perspective of Washington to see what it might tell us about what was happening on that day, the 28th of February in the Oval Office, everything was very favorable to Washington and the US, because the midheaven was the Sun-Venus conjunction of the USA chart, and in fact 4 degrees of Libra was rising, so it squared it. And Mars was in the 10th house, so it was like the government had the upper hand. But as we come and we look at the lunar eclipse from the perspective of Washington, this doesn't look quite so good, because here we have Mars in the 3 o'clock position, Mars in Cancer, 18 degrees Cancer 54. That's in the 7th house of partners and other countries. So it's the other countries who are on the attack. Now, if we look at the lunar eclipse itself, we can see the moon in the noon position and the sun and Saturn at the base of the chart. Very, very widely squaring Jupiter. In fact, it's so wide I haven't even bothered to put it in. But it is, sextiling. There's a sextile from the Sun and Saturn to Uranus, and there is a sextile from Mars to the Moon. So we've got a little cradle configuration here. And what I've been showing you over recent weeks is the importance of planets when they're all at a similar degree area. They bounce off on each other, so they're like they're zinging together. And so we've got Mars, the Moon, the Sun, and Saturn, and Uranus actually all in play here. Even if it looks as though there are some nice little sextiles, put that out of your mind and just think about how these planets are all getting on in the same room. And we just have to know there's a lot of explosiveness going on. There's a lot of aggression going on. There's a lot of endings going on. And that is, of course, what's innate in a lunar eclipse. We've got closure and completion with all full moons. Something is done and dusted, which is why it's a very good time to sort of tie things up, to do a deal. You want to make a deal stick and say it's a done deal, you do it on a full moon. And if that full moon is a lunar eclipse, so much the better. You've got a deal done. But the other side of that whole sentiment is that things are over. Oh, that's all done and dusted. There's no more to go. We're in trouble. So that is the prospect ahead of us. And that lunar eclipse is for the 14th of March. But there's a lot of things that are going to happen before then. And as I said when I started, we're living in accelerated times because, there is, everything's happening hour by hour almost, let alone day by day. So a lot of things have got to happen before that. And in fact, if you can look at the base of this chart again and see how close Saturn is to the Sun, the exact Sun-Saturn conjunction was on the 12th of March. So by the time we come almost 2 days later to the lunar eclipse, Saturn is still firmly attached to the Sun. And what we get with Sun-Saturn conjunctions is we get consolidation. We get something absolutely set. It's done. We've got a result. And I like that. It sounds good, doesn't it? Right now, a lunar eclipse, closure, completion, a done deal, Saturn in there, solid. And, we could read it like that. And we could think, thank goodness, we've got this very special alignment here. And it's all going thumbs up. Finally, there is a sign of an ending of this terrible war in Ukraine. We could read it like that. But I don't feel like that about this chart. I just don't feel like that. I feel that everything that's happening at this particular time is very sad, is incredibly difficult to swallow. And the very next day, within hours of this lunar eclipse, Mercury turns retrograde. And it is almost as if we have to go back over old ground now. We have to go back over things. There is a period of confusion. And I talk about confusion because as the Sun moves away from Saturn, it is moving towards Neptune. In fact, it's going to conjoin Neptune on the 19th of March, which is roughly a week later. And with Neptune, anything Neptunian, you get chaos, you get lies, you get deceit, you get treachery, you get all sorts of things not going at all well. And remember, we've got sheet in there as well. So it's almost as though there are betrayals. There are all sorts of things happening that don't look very promising at all, given what we're looking at here. Now, of course, there are a lot of other things that are happening at the moment as I'm speaking to you. We know that Pope Francis isn't very well. We also know that Europe and the United Kingdom are really in intense kind of discussions and mode to see how strengthened the European Union can become, how strengthened Europe can become in the face of any potential threat from Russia. So there could be a lot of problems with that. And even though we'd like to see, and I think the will is there, you can see that this enormous kind of passion and feeling on behalf of all the leaders that sat around the table with Zelensky and with Sakir yesterday, in fact, that there was a tremendous will to gain strength and to be behind the protection of Europe and certainly the protection of Ukraine. But it's difficult. And how is this going to be attained when we think about the huge obstacles with the position that the United States is now taking and the position that has always been Russia's, that somehow Ukraine belongs to it and there's nothing wrong with going to get it back, except obviously, there is quite a lot going wrong with a sovereign state being invaded by its bigger neighbor. That's actually not quite kosher somehow, which seems to have escaped a few people who seem to think, Russia is completely within its rights. It's defending itself. That massive, great country with I don't know how many million people in it is defending itself against Ukraine. Okay, no, I don't think that's quite the picture. But anyway, here we are. It is what it is. And we are looking at a picture here that says to me, it is chaos, confusion, it is sadness, it is inexplicable events that are happening without anyone seeming to, be able to stop the actual process of what's going on. And I know that I should be the voice of hope, and I am the voice of hope, really. I'm always hopeful. I'm always very optimistic. But I have to call the astrology what it is. I can't look at all this and say, oh, well, this is, well, as somebody who made a comment, all jolly hockey sticks. No, it's definitely not jolly hockey sticks. It is very, very serious indeed. And we need to be aware of that. And as I said on my last video at the end of it, we do have to be truth seekers, all of us. We have to keep our eyes very much on the reality. We need to remember what went on and what is going on and be sure that we understand the correct picture, no matter how much we may believe in our leaders and believe in people who hold a different view. The facts have to speak for themselves, because we are making history right now, and we have to keep our eyes on what is being unfolded and being truthful with that. So within all of this, I can't put two charts on at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I want to show you Donald Trump's chart. Now, I know we've seen this 100 times, but he is the ringmaster here. He really is. I mean, it was Donald Trump that ordered Zelensky out of the White House and said, go away, we don't want you here. You're not going to agree with us. You've been disrespectful to us, so just push off. So, okay, unusual for a president, but anyway, it was what it was. This gets very interesting now, because I'm going to put up Zelensky's chart in a minute. So I want you to have a look at what I've drawn here. We can see this big outer square. It's a little bit of a squeezed square, but what I've done here is to show you the lunar eclipse, Sun conjunct Saturn, opposite the moon, and I've shown you how it fits into Donald Trump's chart. And he has got the Sun opposition the moon. He was born at a full moon eclipse, so we've got a lunar eclipse squaring a natal lunar eclipse. And that's really, really significant, because he stands at a point in his life where he is literally, on the edge. Either things are going to go his way, and from then on, okay, they may not be good, but they're not, disastrous. Or this really is a seminal period, a seminal moment for Donald Trump. And this may actually even portend that, his decline. However you want to interpret that, we're looking at decline. And of course, that Uranus, here we are, look, the transiting Uranus, 24 degrees and 2 minutes of Taurus, his midheaven, 24 degrees of Taurus, 22. So we are minutes away from that Uranus hitting his midheaven for the third and last time. And as you know, the first time Uranus hit his midheaven, he had an assassination attempt on his life. He escaped it, and things have been, remarkably they've been, really, it's been an extraordinary period for Mr. Trump. Absolutely, breakthroughs, breakdowns, breakups. It's been all those B words. And the third time Uranus or any outer planet, or indeed any big planet, comes to a point, whether it's a planet or an angle, as it is in this case, then you usually get the full effect. So this is, either Trump's moment of vindication and victory, and he's had a lot of victorious moments already, but regarding this situation with what we know is going on with Ukraine and Russia, or it is going to be his downfall. It's that extreme. That's what we're looking at. So I want you to look at Zelensky's chart here. Keep in mind these configurations. The Sun, 22 degrees of Gemini, the moon at 21 degrees of Sagittarius. And now let's look at Zelensky's chart. And what do you see? You see 21 degrees of Gemini rising, 21 degrees of Sagittarius setting. Now, you would look at this chart and think in synastric terms, in terms of what does it bode for a relationship, and you would say, wow, these angles are so closely connected. This is a really close and bonded relationship. We could look at it another way, and that's probably the way we need to look at it, is that these two are star-crossed lovers, except they're star-crossed presidents, and their destinies are interlocked with each other. And just in case you've forgotten, Zelensky has a past with Mr. Trump because previously, when Donald Trump was trying to get Zelensky's support against Biden, Hunter Biden, Zelensky refused basically to do that. And so there's bad blood here. And I think that this relationship, which could be a close and good relationship, turned at that point, and we saw what played out in the Oval Office on Friday, the 28th of February. So a very serious backstory playing in this. Now, I think while we've got Zelensky's chart up here, it's quite interesting. We can see that Jupiter rises in his chart. So he's an actor, he was a comedian, and we see that with Jupiter rising people. They're often performers in some way. And they're always big personalities, always. And we've certainly seen this with President Zelensky. He's a very big man in terms of his character and his ambiance, how he presents himself. He's a Sun Aquarian, Sun conjunct Venus, 5 of Aquarius, and of course Pluto is encroaching on that Aquarian Sun and Venus of his, but it's already opposing his Mars and Leo, and has really been ever since 2022, 2023, and the invasion of Ukraine. So this has been the story of his transformation from ordinary person to one of the most important leaders of the time. And he is going to continue to battle on for a while, I think. But it can't escape notice either that Mars has already been at 0 degrees of Leo. It's gone back into Cancer, but it's going to come all the way around into Leo again as we get through April. And there's going to be the big and third and final Mars-Pluto opposition on the 27th of April. And that may be perhaps a little bit nearer the time that we sort of see a few more ramifications of what's going on now. But I don't see this as a successful point for Zelensky. I think he's still under fire is a good way of looking at it, which sort of goes towards this idea of what the lunar eclipse may have in store. Now, this lunar eclipse isn't really affecting anything in Zelensky's chart. We don't see that. Well, his Jupiter is 21 degrees of his ascendant 21, almost 22 of Gemini. I suppose it is squaring his ascendant-descendant axis, and also we can roll Jupiter in there, but it is not as profound as the effects of this eclipse on Donald Trump's chart. Again, we look at that real cross of destiny happening with him. I want now also to look at the United States chart. It's what we call the Sibley chart, 4th of July, 1776, 1710 in the afternoon. This chart has weathered all storms. It's one that reliably responds to big events. The ascendant at 12 degrees of Sag and Gemini. When the Twin Towers came down, the Saturn-Pluto opposition of the time was straddling that ascendant-descendant axis. And there was a few more details as well. But what we're seeing happening now is if you look at Neptune in the sort of noon position up there, 22 degrees of Virgo, that is very much in the story. It is the exact position of Saturn on the lunar eclipse. And of course, it's only a degree away. And when you put Neptune in the mix, you have to know that everything is not as it seems. There is loss, there are betrayals, there's treachery going on, there's all sorts of very, very unpleasant things happening. And we can look at Neptune and we can see that the divine is always represented by Neptune, that if only we can raise ourselves up enough to get that vibration, divine things can happen. But the problem is that with the world the way it is and with the leaders the way they are, we're not getting divine kind of actions, are we? We're getting quite the reverse. So I think looking at the whole picture, I would say this is probably not going to be the best of times as we head into this lunar eclipse. And you know, what can we do as individuals? Well, obviously, we will have this lunar eclipse in our own charts, and I'm going to be looking at that in another video, so we get a little bit more of an angle on what it means. But I think given that you're listening to me, and probably a lot of other people who are motivated to inspire, this is about a sort of being the best of ourselves and handling our own small situations with wisdom and kindness and looking at things objectively, trying to see where the other person is coming from and trying to cut out anger and resentment and all those very unpleasant emotions, trying to rise above those unpleasant emotions when we're dealing with stuff in our own lives. Because that way, if we can do it, every single one of us, we're literally getting into the collective consciousness, and better decisions can be made by leaders because we've already fueled the tank, so to speak. And it's possible to, connect with that. And I do believe there are some very, very good leaders around. And I have great faith in Sir Keir Starmer. Haven't talked about him much. We don't look at his chart very much. It's mainly because we don't know his time of birth. But I think he has held himself well under this, and he has taken the spirit, certainly, of the British people who are almost 100% behind what's going on in Ukraine, and therefore identify with the Ukrainian people. I know there are some people in England who don't and feel exactly the same way as maybe President Trump, that it's not our war, let's keep out of it, let them sort it out. And there's an argument to be made for that. But personally, and I think in the main, when you're looking at Britain and those who are, having Sir Keir be our Prime Minister, he's doing some great stuff at this time. And I do believe that if Europe can become stronger and united behind this, it can only be a good thing going forward. The reasons for having this happen have been terrible, and nobody wants to have gone through all this just to get to the point where we need to wake up, smell the coffee, and do something for ourselves. But in the sweep of time, when we look back on it, we may see all sorts of good things coming from the terrible times we seem to be living through at the moment. So I'm going to end it there, and I do hope you feel that I've sort of ended it on a ray of hope. I'm going to be doing another one of these analyses in about 10 days' time, because we've got a solar eclipse coming up after that. There is no end of astrological biggies coming up, which are going to really play into the global pattern at this time. We're taking it one step at a time, hopefully, monitoring our own progress as well as what's going on in the world. But, in a way, everything is quite random at the moment. I'm sure you'll agree with me. Anyway, I will say bye for now. Thank you for watching, and I will get on from here and start to look at all 12 signs and how this pattern is affecting you. Bye for now.